You ever have someone stand over the ashes of your life and blame you for starting the fire? That's exactly what Orla Vexley did. Stood there behind the yellow police tape, arms folded, telling me I was responsible for building a bomb shelter for toddlers, telling me that's why my twins were dead. Not because she'd ordered an illegal brush burn, not because she'd tampered with my kids' playroom, but because, in her words, it was an eyesore. I mean, how do you even answer that, right? You can't. You just stand there and watch her act like she's the victim, not the president of the Valowin Hollow Architectural Compliance Board, the queen of appearances, the high priestess of HOA bylaws, blaming the fire on the structure instead of the match she lit. Yeah, Orla always led with appearances. To her, my fireproof steel and polymer nest, the playroom I built from the same materials we use for wildfire bunkers in the Forestry Service, wasn't a safety measure, it was a threat to her precious sense of historical cohesion. She wanted it gone before it was ever tested by fire. The irony is the same ugly structure that made her clutch her pearls had surveillance-grade sensors inside, tracking every flicker of heat, every change in air pressure, every lethal second that killed my daughters. People in this neighborhood thought I was just a widower with a welding kit. They forgot I spent years designing shelters for the government, and that every panel of that nest was calibrated to survive what would turn a Jeep into scrap metal. The thing they laughed at ended up recording everything. If you've ever been told you don't belong somewhere because you try to protect your family, yeah, you know where I'm coming from. What happened to my girls, Ari and Ellen, wasn't some random tragedy. It was a chain of events, and I had every single link in the data. 7 years I spent building classified fireproofing systems for defense contractors. I walked away from all of it after my wife Mira burned alive in a lab fire. Packed up, moved to Valowin Hollow for a quiet life for the twins. That nest was my redemption, built from the same synthetic foam, the same heat-proof alloys Mira helped design. Breathable insulation, jet turbine-proof shell. The HOA couldn't care less. Orla called it military, brutalist, non-compliant. I followed every code, every setback, every utility line, still got rejected for not being wood. I kept quiet, figured the structure would speak for itself. Then Orla started her brush burns. Unauthorized, no permits, just piles of dead trimmings heaped up a few yards from my fence. I filed reports. The board ignored me. Orla laughed right in my face. Then the port cover on the nest's southern vent disappeared. I'd sealed it the week before, but someone had cracked the latch. That morning, I was welding a neighbor's railing in my shed, just steps away. The twins were napping in the nest, white noise humming. Mira's old rainforest lullabies playing softly. At 11:07, a gust kicked up from the west. At 11:08, HOA landscapers lit the brush pile. At 11:09, smoke found its way straight through the dislodged vent. The nest was airtight, supposed to be, but smoke doesn't need much, just a crack in a current. I smelled it before I saw it. By the time I dragged both girls out, Ari's pulse was gone. Ellen gasped twice, then nothing. Orla didn't cry, didn't run, just stood there and said, "Your twins are dead because of it." Not a tear, not a tremble, like she was reading off a legal notice. But the nest didn't cause their deaths. It witnessed them. Every sensor pinged data back to my server. Temperature spikes, falling air quality, wind direction, everything. HOA's fire, from their own property, entered through a vent they'd tampered with. I showed the marshal, didn't say a word, just handed over the logs and drone footage. The match was visible. The point of ignition was clear. The marshal didn't flinch, just pressed his radio. Probable cause confirmed. Detained the HOA president. 3 minutes later, Orla Vexley was in cuffs. That's how she found out what a fireproof structure actually records. But the real warning sign wasn't the citation. It was how Orla would slow her inspection walk, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing at my daughters playing, jotting something down about the nest, never making eye contact. The first citation? Unapproved auxiliary structure composed of non-harmonious exterior materials. No mention of safety, just that it didn't look like a cottage. The nest was silver gray, curved, set on 4 concrete piers, nothing touching the trees or fences. The safest thing on the block, but she couldn't stand that it didn't match her vision. Left a violation under my door with a pink post-it. Let's talk about alternatives that better reflect the community's vision. My girls couldn't even read, but they knew what a pink notice meant. I didn't respond. Submitted an appeal with all the technical specs, thermal maps, wind loads, the whole deal, just to have it on record. Got denied in 48 hours. Structure does not align with pre-approved residential design palette. That's when the pressure started. $50 a day, fine for non-removal. Then a secondary violation for visual obstruction of greenbelt view. The nest was 23 feet from the fence, compliant with every code, but Orla kept filing, kept coming by, longer and longer each time, sometimes loud enough for the kids to hear, saying stuff like, such a shame when children grow up thinking rules don't apply. I caught her once, taking pictures of the vent, didn't even flinch when I confronted her. Just documenting violations. I said, "You're trespassing." She just quoted some HOA bylaw about visual access rights. I went inside, quietly disabled the external cameras, and replaced them with covert ones. Solar, silent, built into the trim. No warning lights, nothing obvious. Documented everything. Mapped her walk patterns, set up low-angle IR sensors by the gate. The nest wasn't just a playhouse anymore. It was a pressure point. I knew she pushed too far. Just didn't expect it to be with fire. Not yet, not like that. Desmond Foray wasn't like the rest of them. Maintenance guy, sweat on his brow, never looked happy to be measuring fences with his laser level. The day he walked up my driveway, I thought he was going to photograph the nest again. Instead, he mumbled, just here to log boundary footage. Routine compliance sweep. New board order. I joked, let me guess, Orla wants to confirm the nest casts a shadow. He gave a weak smile, hovered on the concrete, and then, off the record, said, I filed a warning last month, said that brush line needed clearing. No open burns. Got buried. By who? Same person who renews my contract. That was the crack in the wall. Desmond looked at the nest with worry, not judgment. I could tell he was a dad. He confessed Orla wanted the nest gone before the next HOA quarterly. She was going to call it a safety risk, use him as a witness. And would you call it unsafe? I asked. He shook his head, said he hadn't seen the inside, didn't ask to. Then he lifted his phone and started recording. Not my yard, but the brush pile 10 feet from the maintenance shed. Just in case, he said. Didn't say in case of what. 2 days before the fire, emergency HOA meeting. Orla at the podium, boasting about a scheduled soil purification burn. Every phone in the room lit up with a red banner. Fire watch in effect. High wind forecast. Desmond was there, slouched in the back, flipping his clipboard. When she mentioned the burn site next to my yard, I saw him flinch, but he didn't speak up. Afterward, in the parking lot, I called him out. You know that's a risk. He just muttered, she'll do it anyway. Says it's symbolic. She knows what's buried there. I said, not literally buried, right? He just glanced at my kids. You should move them. The next morning, I finally looked at the flash drive Desmond had slipped me. 2 files, his flagged inspection report, and a 54-second video. In it, Orla stood next to the brush pile, telling her crew, doesn't matter what the manual says, light it. Just make sure the wind doesn't change. 5 days later, the wind changed. At 10:56 a.m., 2 landscapers dumped a jerrycan on the brush pile, one recording Orla's voice memo, light it now. We're behind schedule. The nest sat 22 feet away, built on stone gravel, outwardly fireproof. Inside, my girls watched cartoons. My nanny, Miriam, read on the patio. I saw the first flicker of flame, ran out yelling, what the hell are you doing? The workers shrugged, following HOA instructions. I charged down the hill, the flames still small but already crackling up. Orla stood back, arms folded, watching like she was at a parade. When I told her there were children inside, she just blinked. Perhaps you should have followed the rules. By the time Miriam came coughing, yelling smoke, the alarms going off, I sprinted back. Every step across that gravel felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The nest had triple-sealed vents, fail-safes, unless someone tampered. And someone had. That exact vent I'd noticed loose days earlier now let in a thin, deadly ribbon of smoke. Inside, the air was thick, burning my lungs. Ari was limp in the corner. Ellen gasping, trying to wake her sister. I dragged them both out. Started compressions, but it was too late. Miriam sobbed. Sirens in the distance. By the time firefighters arrived, the brush fire had burned out, contained by HOA standards, but my family was gone. While paramedics zipped up the bags, Orla stood there talking to a board member about negligent materials. I walked into my house, turned on the terminal. The sensor data was already uploaded. I watched the whole nightmare in temperature spikes, pressure drops, smoke levels. The breach was exactly at the vent Orla had crouched by 3 days before. The camera footage showed her, plain as day, bending over for 6 seconds, then walking away. Manual tampering. I compiled the evidence. Drone footage, audio logs, structural reports, Desmond's warnings, her voice authorizing the burn. Backed it all up, cloud, hard drive, off-grid. Sent a copy to the County Fire Bureau. Investigator Corin responded fast. Within days, criminal charges were filed. Orla arrested. The board in panic. The truth laid out in data no HOA lawyer could twist. I didn't need to yell at the community hall meeting. I didn't need to argue. I just showed them the sensor logs, the vent panel bent by human hands, the footage of Orla saying, "Light it." The board collapsed in real time. Neighbors gasped. Board members went pale. Desmond backed me up with his field reports. The officers came for Orla right then, in front of everyone. She tried to spin it, tried to make herself the victim. But when the fire investigator said, "Your children are alive, Miss Vexley," and looked at me, I didn't have anything left to say. The truth burned through every excuse. Orla's composure shattered. The click of the cuffs was the only sound in the room. After the arrests, after the board was dissolved and a new committee took over, we built a memorial where the nest had stood. Same dimensions, same footprint, but now it was open, a burn-proof capsule inside, a timeline on the walls. Neighbors came through, read, cried, learned. The mayor spoke about community responsibility and fire code reform. But all I saw were the 2 copper plates. Ari with, Ellen with, July 3rd, Vallow and Hollow Fire Memorial. I placed Ellen's old sticker book on a shelf and turned away. That nest isn't just a shelter now. It's proof that safety isn't about appearances, that HOA power can hide behind silence. But when nobody listens, someone has to record. I still carry the original drive, not out of grief, but out of duty. Because every time someone walks into that shelter, reads those names, and realizes it could have been their kids, it means my daughters didn't die for nothing. So, tell me, where do you stand on justice? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Drop your story in the comments. Share your thoughts on what's right, what's wrong, and how far you'd go to protect your family. If you want to hear more stories about standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe, and let's make sure none of this ever gets buried again.